I played the worst JRPGs on the PlayStation 2, but apparently you guys wanted me to get tortured more because you left a ton of comments of games that I missed in that last video, so here I am again playing more of the worst JRPGs on the PS2 based on your recommendations. And I'll be honest with you, some of these I actually really enjoyed, but some of them are even worse than the games in the last video and just don't hold up well at all. Now, one game that's definitely aged well is Chrono Trigger. The PC version isn't some fancy remaster though, it's pretty bare bones. But there's actually a way to make it play exactly how you want, and that's where today's sponsor, Wand, comes in. Wand is a desktop app that helps you customize single-player games your way. With support for over 3,500 titles, it even auto-detects what's in your library so you can just jump straight in. Let me show you how it works. Say you're stuck on a boss or tired of endless grinding, you can open up Wand's in-game overlay, tweak your XP gain, or MP recovery rate, and keep the momentum going without changing the difficulty. It's all about saving time and staying in the fun parts. I can even use Wand's interactive maps and tools to get around faster or find hidden items. Super handy for older games like Chrono Trigger that don't hold your hand much. And don't worry, it's single player only, so it never touches online or competitive modes. So if you want to breathe new life into your favorite classics, download Wand for free using my link wand.gg/thegamingshelf or click the link in the description below. Now for the first game up, it might have the absolute worst voice acting I've ever heard in a video game. And of course, I'm talking about the infamous Chaos Wars. It was developed by Idea Factory, and these guys just keep showing up in these videos. It has a Metacritic score of 64 and was released in North America on June 3rd, 2008. The voice acting is infamous, but I'm curious if the game itself is actually any good. Let's take a look. So it begins with a few high schoolers looking to explore a cave in the mountains behind their school. Supposedly it holds some kind of treasure. After going there, they discover something that looks like a computer that starts talking to them. So far, the voice acting isn't offensively bad, but it feels like it doesn't match the character's expression or dialogue box visuals. I mean, just take a listen here.
Hey, what's this? Some kind of warning?
Next, we cut to this scene with a girl and some creepy guy that seems to be following her. And here we get our first delicious taste of the game's awful voice acting. Just take a listen.
You thought you were the only one who could open the Scion gate? Oops! I have to go now. My boss will be angry.
Summon Gate. Wow, that is some serious overacting. Finally, the two groups meet up and we get our first taste of combat. It kind of reminds me of the Phantom Brave games. It's turn-based tactical combat with limited movement, but it's not on a grid. It's sort of like an area of movement around the character. And each character has a set of abilities and can use items. Nothing special, but kind of solid. After, Rin and our boy Hyoma finally meet and try to figure out what's going on. Hyoma is trying to get back to his home in Tokyo, and Rin is a gatekeeper. She can summon knights to her world. Rin says Hyoma cannot return to his world, but he's determined to find a way nonetheless. And during their adventures, they encounter a group called Lewin, who tries to capture Rin for their own nefarious desires. That's basically the gist of the story without spoiling it, not that you guys really care about this game getting spoiled. Now, eventually we get a base of operations. Here we can talk with characters, level up their stats, get different weapons, and then travel to different maps. There's lots of side mission maps to grind, but we're ultimately trying to get keys to progress the story and move on to further dungeons. Here's the basic game loop. You find a new dungeon, run into new characters, we either fight them as enemies or recruit them to our party after the battle, go back to the base to level up, and then rinse and repeat. It basically never deviates from this formula. I did want to highlight maybe the worst pair of actors in this entire game, and that's for the characters Gaisen and Emily. Emily sounds like someone that's literally never acted before, and we'll get to that in a second. And Gaisen is just way overacting, totally chewing up the scenery. Just take a listen.
No way. Retreat. Strategic withdrawal.
Yes, sir. It's Kushima Emily. Withdraw.
Now this would be the perfect time to explain why the voice acting in the game is so bad. So the president and CEO of publisher O3 Entertainment was Chris Jelinek. And the credits for this game, there are 4 actors with the same last name: Quest, Tyler, Kay, and Lee. Now, I can't confirm whether or not they're his children or just family, but it's no coincidence that they share the same last name. Whether it was to cut costs or just pure nepotism, family obviously voiced characters in this game. And those 4 never acted in anything else as far as I could find. Now, as far as the game itself goes, goes, the combat is far and away the best part of it. It's not going to blow your mind, but the battles are mildly entertaining and it was kind of fun leveling up characters. It does get a little bit more interesting and dynamic as the game goes on, but the art is pretty bad. Now, for as much grief as I give Idea Factory, they have significantly improved over the years, but it's pretty amateur looking here. And the music is so repetitive. I mean, get used to hearing those same songs over and over and over again. And yeah, the voice acting is as bad as advertised.
Samon Gate?
Funny as a history piece for the voice acting, but outside of that, there's really nothing special here worth your time. But don't go anywhere, because later we'll be getting into one of the most hilariously unfinished JRPGs I've ever played. Next up, we have Drakengard 2. Now, the Drakengard series is what the Nier series spun off from, also created by Yoko Taro. However, Yoko Taro didn't direct this game and had very limited involvement in its development, making it kind of the black sheep of the series. It has a Metacritic score of 58 and was released in North America on November 14th, 2006. Fun fact, while it was developed by Square Enix and published by them in Japan, it was actually published by Ubisoft in North America. So let's dive on in and see what this is all about. So it's a direct sequel to the original Drakengard, referencing the 5 seals that locked away the red dragon in the first game. Here we play as Noe, a knight of the seal whose duty is to protect the seals. Now, before I can really begin my duty, I need to run through the game's combat tutorial. For a PS2 game, the moveset is surprisingly diverse. You have a normal attack, launching upward slash, a downward stab from the air, you can dodge in both directions, you can backflip, and there's even a mid-air recovery. Admittedly, it's not as smooth as something like Devil May Cry. It feels a bit jank, especially with no lock-on, but combat is kind of fun. This tutorial battle almost feels like a Warriors game, as there's lots of enemies that go down pretty easily. I also eventually unlock magic. But that's not the end of what Noe can do in combat. There's a whole other piece to it with dragon riding. Noe can ride a dragon, and there's aerial combat where you're fighting flying enemies, and there's these sort of box things that kind of just sit there waiting for you to hit them. And you can also attack with your dragon in the ground battles. It hardly seems fair, as you can just hover around and blast away enemies. Like the ground combat, it's kind of fun, but also a bit jank. Also, just look at these enemies here. They're sort of just running around in circles waiting to get hit. Now, what's cool is you can actually hop on and off your dragon at will in these bigger ground battles, but you can't in dungeons. Speaking of which, I now have a new party member, Eris, that I can swap to during ground battles. She fights with a spear and has a bit of a different style, but it's still kind of janky, but still fun. One weird thing I'm noticing about the game's cutscenes, though, is that the production values vary wildly. You do have some cool portrait art and the voice acting is solid, but sometimes they're fully animated with dynamic camera movements, and other times the characters literally just stand there completely still and the camera moves are very basic. To me, it feels like they ran out of time or had a very low budget and they try to just make it work. It feels really jarring and strange. I've never really seen a game's cutscenes vary this drastically outside of maybe Xenogears on the second disc. Now, along the way, I find out some interesting revelations. There are people guarding these seals, but essentially they're sacrificing themselves because by doing so, their life force is being drained slowly. This is kind of conflicting for Noe, as he doesn't agree with this, but Eris pushes back pretty hard, saying it's necessary and that they're willing martyrs. They're happy to do it. The Drakengard and Nier series are known for their morally ambiguous story and characters, but Drakengard 2 in this regard is kind of the weakest of the bunch. Noe is too much of a straight up good guy, not that interesting, but overall it still makes for some interesting story moments. Eventually, a sort of world map opens up, allowing you to take on side quests for grinding and extra rewards. However, it quickly gets boring, as it's basically more of the same combat with the same enemies, either in the air or on the ground. Dungeons, however, do get more interesting. You have different enemies, there's puzzle elements, and there's even platforming. I'll admit the platforming isn't great and the camera is pretty bad. It's kind of hard to see what you're doing at times, but I appreciate the game trying to mix up the gameplay. And that's pretty much everything you can expect from the game over its roughly 17 hours, but that could bump up drastically depending on how many of the side quests you want to take on. Overall, not bad. It's doing some cool stuff, especially for the time, but the game's budget is obviously pretty low and it shows. Not to mention it's visually really drab, lots of earth tones, very gray, not that much color, and it also gets repetitive really quickly. I would really only recommend this for Nier fans wanting to experience the entire series, or PS2 fans that feel like they want to dig into some hidden gems that they might have missed. Otherwise, I think you're pretty safe skipping this one. Alright, next up we have The Nightmare of Druaga Fushigino Dungeon. It was developed by Arika, probably best known for the Street Fighter EX games. It has a Metacritic score of 57 and was released in North America on November 27th, 2004. If you're familiar with the Mystery Dungeon subgenre of RPGs, this is actually the 8th game in the original Mystery Dungeon series. So I guess we're going back to where it all started. From reading reviews, the game's gameplay felt dated and its difficulty was pretty punishing. Well, let's dive on in and see if its Nightmare title is truly fitting. So in the game, I play as Prince Gil, and someone named Lady Kai has been kidnapped and taken to a place called the Sealed Tower, so I head there to try and save her. Now, if you've never played a mystery dungeon game before, here's how they work. Your goal is eventually to reach a certain basement level, and in order to do that, you need to find a key to unlock it, and you'll be finding keys by exploring floors, fighting off monsters, and discovering treasure. But the unique quirk of these games is that enemies won't act until you do, so you move, and then they'll move, you attack, and then they'll attack. Nightmare of Druaga does something really interesting that I've not seen in a mystery dungeon game before, and that's that you can break through walls at the cost of losing 5% of your health. A very cool mechanic and could make for some interesting gameplay later on. I said this in my worst Pokemon games video and I'll say it here again. Mystery dungeon games scratch a very specific itch for me that I find incredibly addicting. Something about the simplistic gameplay and fully exploring a floor before going to the next. It just really satisfies my OCD. I totally get why people wouldn't like this type of game though. Now eventually I find a woman named Kalindra and bring her back to the surface, vowing to return to save Lady Kai. And I'm not gonna lie, I'm genuinely loving this so far. Yeah, it's simple, but it's also very satisfying. I also really dig the vibe. There's something about the clanking of armor as I'm walking through these dark dungeons. It's very cool so far. Now back on the surface, I get some more tutorials. They explain that if I get knocked out in combat, I lose all my items, but I can inscribe them and save them. Gotta be careful, I suppose, as it sounds like there's some roguelike elements. You can also appraise items that you find while exploring, and you can either sell them for gold or use them if they're better. So then I dive back into the dungeon, and again, I'm having a great time. I'm exploring, fighting, leveling up, finding treasure, and the game is also slowly adding new mechanics and quirks. Like here, there's level elevation and ever-encroaching darkness and multiple new enemy types. I will admit that it's starting to get a little bit tough. I'm needing to be more mindful of my AP and actually use my items. And this area right here is tricky. There's way more enemies and I need to activate a switch to drain the water so I can pick up the key. Very cool and strategic. Now eventually though, I do get knocked out for the first time and I lost everything. It was devastating to start all the way over, but I was determined and eventually figured out the patterns and made it past the part I kept getting knocked out at. And another thing I appreciate is that the gear actually reflects on your character. This was pretty rare for this era of games, so it was a fun discovery. Now eventually I make it to the first boss, this giant slime, and I didn't really know how to hit it or do real damage. I was kind of just doing one damage at a time. I wasn't sure if I was missing something, but eventually it splits into tiny slimes and exposes its core. And from there you can damage them and actually do some big damage. And after a few rounds of this, I eventually got it down, got a bit more of story about Lady Kai's capture, and just kept going over and over again. Overall, I really dug Nightmare of Druaga. I totally get why people wouldn't like it, especially back in 2004, but I feel like a remake or a game like this in 2025 would absolutely thrive. It is definitely punishing and can feel unfair, but there's something satisfying about coming up with a plan and getting through each level efficiently. And I don't think it belongs on this list of bad PS2 JRPGs because I genuinely think it's a good game. If you like mystery dungeon games, I'd check it out. Plus, if you're a physical collector, that box art is gorgeous. All right, next up we have Dawn of Mana, developed by Square Enix, and it has a Metacritic score of 57, released on May 22nd, 2007. From what I can tell, fans and critics were upset because this wasn't the Secret of Mana follow-up they were hoping for. And keep in mind, the West didn't get Trials of Mana back in the day on the Super Nintendo, and the other Mana games were all spin-offs. So waiting 13 years for a proper sequel is a long time, and I can totally understand their disappointment. But in a vacuum with no expectations, I'm curious if this is actually any good. Let's take a look. So in the game, you play as Keldric, a knight charged with protecting Ritzia, the maiden of the Mana Tree. The game starts out by chasing after her pet, and this sort of serves as a tutorial for the controls and the combat. The game has action combat like other Mana games, and it has this sort of floaty feel to the jumps. Kingdom Hearts is the best comparison I could give in terms of how it actually feels to play it. And it has a very unique quirk to combat and leveling up. The game encourages you to daze enemies, and you can do this by pushing objects into them. It stuns them for a period of time depending on what the object is, and only when you do this will they drop money and these sort of level up tokens. So you don't level up traditionally just by defeating enemies, but only after collecting enough of these tokens. And from what I can gather, this resets after every level because this is sort of a level-based game, not like a big open world type game. It's a bit strange, but we'll roll with it. And I'm not gonna lie, I had endless amounts of fun with this combat. It's all physics-based, so once you push an object into an enemy or one enemy into another, they bounce off each other and fly all over the place. I thoroughly thoroughly enjoyed this. And I also want to say, I think this game looks fantastic. It's exactly what you'd expect from a PS2 era mana game, and it also has solid voice acting both from Sam Riegel and Laura Bailey, the voices of Teddy and Rise from Persona 4 respectively. And after clearing the tutorial, an evil looking guy named King Stroud marches on in and is heading for the mana tree, so we follow after him. Now we're in more of a dungeon versus this open field area. I'm still having a ton of fun with the combat, but here there's much more platforming and it's a little janky. It's not bad, just not as precise as I'd like it to be. And I also have new additions to combat. While in this dungeon, I get this seed of the tree that attaches to my arm, and now I have a vine that can shoot out, I can shoot projectiles, I can grab objects, and I can even grab smaller enemies and throw them all over the place. This was endlessly entertaining. I had so much fun grabbing enemies, throwing them into each other, watching them bounce all over the place. This was a blast. I also unlocked magic like wind, fire, healing, etc. from different spirits that I was running into. Now, eventually I make it to the first boss, and here's where the game starts to get a little stinky. Like normal enemies, you need to stun it to do any major damage. And I'll admit, I didn't do a great job because I needed to hit it in its weak spot behind it. Instead, I was kind of just hitting it from the front and not doing a lot of damage. And it's really easy to get hit for big damage as soon as they recover from getting stunned. And also what's annoying is that to hit the weak spot, you kind of need to jump a little bit to hit it. You can't just hit it on flat ground, so it made it a little bit tricky. And eventually I did beat it on my first try, but it didn't feel great or that fun. Now, unfortunately in the story, Ritzia gets kidnapped and now we have to go chase after her and save her. Here we're back to a more open area fighting enemies. And here there's more enemies, different kinds of enemies, and it's honestly a bit more challenging, but it's still a bunch of goofy fun. I'm throwing enemies all over the place, they're bouncing everywhere, terrain is falling, I'm getting launched half the time, it's just great. Now, is this good? I don't know, but I can't help but just laugh and enjoy myself. Now I make it to another dungeon, there's more janky platforming, there's more fighting, and I get to the second boss. Here's where the game took a huge nosedive for me. I can see what they're trying to do with the systems they've built, but the bosses in this game are just not fun. Here there's this tree monster and it has tentacles that pop up and they drop exploding pumpkins. So you're supposed to pick up these pumpkins when they drop, throw it at the tree, and then hit it when it's stunned. But for me, none of it works. I'm constantly getting thrown around by these tentacles, pumpkins are dropping on my head, throwing me all over the arena, not to mention smaller enemies are constantly spawning in as well. It just felt like a total mess. It took me 3 tries and I don't even honestly know how I won. I think a pumpkin exploded near it or something. I honestly feel like I got lucky. But overall, I really liked what Dawn of Mana is going for. It has a really nice, charming, lighthearted story, looks great, has a silly physics-based combat system. The platforming, however, is kind of janky and not always fun, but the bosses are straight trash. Some of the worst I've played in a while, especially that tree boss. But if you're a fan of the Mana series, I think it's genuinely worth checking out. And at only 15 hours long, it's not going to take up that much of your time. And finally, we make it to the piece de la resistance of this video, Orphen, Scion of Sorcery. This is a truly bizarre game, so buckle up. Also, I don't know about you, but this box art is just burned into my brain for some reason. I had never played this game up until now, but I feel like I've seen this box art a million times. Anyways, the game was developed by Shade Incorporated, whose latest release was Samurai Maiden back in 2022. And this game has a Metacritic score of 54 and was released on October 26, 2000. And it's based on the light novel and anime series Sorceress Stabber Orphen. And it might be a stretch to call this an RPG because it's more of an action-adventure game with turn-based-ish combat. It's really hard to explain what this game is without showing you, so let's just dive on in, shall we? So the game begins with an animated cutscene, I assume from the show, but I'm not sure. The main characters are walking around a port city, these 2 little guys try to pick a fight with them, and then they get torched, and then the main characters just walk away. Then it cuts to a ship with all the same characters on it together. It's almost like that first scene never happened and was very confusing. In fact, I think it would be less confusing if that animated cutscene wasn't there at all. Now everyone on board is starting to get the idea that we're not going where we thought we were because it's taking too long. And before we know it, the ship is starting to flood with water and we need to escape. And let me tell you, these cutscenes in this game are laughably bad. They remind me of the original Resident Evil games back on the PS1. There's no camera movements, no subtitles, no character portraits, characters just talking and animating pretty poorly, I might add. And every so often there's zoom-ins or weird facial animations that are just downright hilarious. Now what's annoying about this game is as we open every door, the game takes control away from me and characters need to say something every single time. I mean, mean, why not let them talk while I'm walking around? It feels like trying to play a game, but every 3 minutes someone runs into the room and takes the controller out of your hands for a few seconds. It's incredibly annoying. I'm also opening chests and getting all these items, and I don't have a clue what any of them do. There's no way to look at my inventory, so I can't tell what any of them are. Oh, and also the camera controls are on the shoulder buttons instead of the right analog stick. Definitely early growing pains from this time of gaming, but it just doesn't feel good to control. Then finally we get into our first battle, and it just sort of starts. There's no explanation, there's no tutorial, and for a few seconds I didn't even know I was in combat until I started pressing buttons. The combat in this game is really weird, and I'm going to try my best to explain it to you. It's a pseudo turn-based / action combat system. So you can't move your character, but you can select who you attack. Then you have a melee range attack. You can block, but you kind of need to charge it up. You have this sort of fire spell and a lightning spell. And as you can see, there's no user interface, there's no menu, nothing. It's hard to tell what the enemy health is, when you're actually ready to block, and when your spells are fully charged up. The best way I can describe how this game looks and feels is it feels like this is the pre-alpha or mid-development version of a battle system without all the bells and whistles added. It just feels incomplete and honestly not fun at all. And this serpent fight on this ship, it was something. It's constantly swimming under the ship so I can't attack it. It's jumping out of the water. It's hard to tell when I can hit it, and there's a really long charge up time for my block. It's just so slow and honestly totally unfun. This whole game has a bizarre feeling to it because of how unfinished it feels in pretty much every respect. But the weird thing is there's a ton of voice acting in the game, and honestly it's not that bad, so clearly they had a budget for the game. It feels like the voice cast is where all the money went instead of polishing the game. Now after that fight we crash into this tower, and let me tell you about this godforsaken tower. At first, I didn't even know you could climb it. You can see me here trying to climb it, but nothing happens. But then I try again, and I can. It just works whenever it wants to. Then I finally start climbing, and this is the most miserable thing ever. Ultimately, you're just climbing up a vine to get inside the tower, but they put a million wrong paths, and you climb so slow. Oh my god, this was just so annoying and took forever. I actually had to look up a Let's Play to figure out the correct path, or else I never would have made it anywhere. There is so much more to this game that I could go on and on about, like the weird level design, the bad combat, the janky animations, but I'll spare us all and just wrap this one up. One thing about this game that's clear is that it's unfinished. There are so many mechanics and design choices and cutscenes that feel just slapped together. It's honestly a complete mess from top to bottom, and if I'm being honest, 54 is way too generous of a score for this one. It deserves to be in the 40s or below. Unless you want to torture yourself, stay far away from Orphen's Scion of Sorcery. So here's how they were originally ranked based on their Metacritic score, but if I were to re-rank them, they'd look something like this. Chaos Wars is way too high and Dawn of Mana is way too low, but Orphen is right where it belongs, with the slop. Now those were a few bad PS2 JRPGs, but if you want to see the actual worst JRPGs on the PlayStation 2, including what I think is the worst JRPG I've ever played, make sure you watch this video next.